I'm back with a new video this week. I can't get enough. I hope you'll join me. And if you watched the first video in my series, it should be lower down on the feed. Today, I want to talk about you, your dinner, and climate change. You might have seen the IPCC report that came out about maybe a week and a half ago or 2 weeks ago that talks. Well, it's scary. Let's be honest. It's a little bit scary. And it says that we need to, as a globe, as a country, we need to reach peak global emissions within the next 3 years and then rapidly plummet after that. And I am not a scientist. You probably know if you're on my page, you're following me because I'm a chef and I tell you how to cook dinner. But I follow a lot of climate change scientists and other people. My favorite ones are very hopeful because there are many reasons to be hopeful, even when it feels like, we're strapped to a fiery rock that's just headed towards doom. Let's not go there. There are so many reasons to be hopeful. And what they say, and you can look up your favorite scientists if you want to delve deeper into the science, but what they say is basically that we've come a long way already. We have all the tools that we need to change and, make the future brighter and greener, and that there is no point where we will have crossed a line that is too far to recover from. And that point, I think, I'm somebody who just in general in my life always feels like I'm running out of time. And that point really resonates with me. I like that. So I want to repeat that. That said, we need to act, and we need to act with urgency, and we all need to do what we can. So in this video, I want to talk about your dinner, individual actions, and systemic actions, just a little bit to talk about the difference between those things. And then I'm going to leave you with two very easy, doable actions that you can take in your family today or tomorrow. They will not cost you any money, and you don't need any special materials. So they're two very, very doable actions. And then hopefully when we talk a little bit about individual change versus systemic change, you will feel inspired, but also let off the hook a little bit. I'm going to let you off the hook if you're feeling any stress about that. Okay, so stay tuned for those things. Somebody on one of my social media posts recently saw me call myself a food waste educator and said, "Wow, what's a food waste educator and how did you become one?" And I responded honestly, which is that I made it up. No, I guess there are other food waste educators. I named myself that because, like I said, I'm not a scientist. I don't study the climate. I wish I could do a Zach Morris timeout and go become a climate scientist. Sure, that sounds amazing, but I don't really have the time to do that. What I am is a trained chef, and for many, many years, my goal was to cook for people. I always, from the very beginning, wanted people to be able to sit down at the table, enjoy their meal, have conversations, and come together around food. In the very first incarnation of my business, that is what my mission was. And what is so interesting to me, if you follow business or building businesses or anything like that, my product maybe and my daily activities have changed over the last 18 years since I've been doing this, but my mission actually really hasn't. And that wasn't something that was always exactly clear to me as, life threw me curveballs and you kind of hang on for the ride. But my mission is really still the same, is to help busy people and their families sit down to have a great meal and do that with less stress. So I still do that, but I do that in different ways. When I first started, I was cooking for people as a personal chef, and I had a meal delivery company. And my introduction to not wasting food actually came from a restaurant consultant, hi Louise, who I hired to help me make some financial projections to get a business loan. And she reminded me that when you're running a food business, every penny counts, and the margins are so thin in food that you don't want to waste anything. So her example was that if you had tomatoes and you chopped off the top to then cook those tomatoes, you better be making salsa out of the tops of those tomatoes and use everything, because every piece of food you buy, you're buying the whole thing. So if you buy cauliflower and throw away the leaves and the core, you paid for those leaves and that core. They're edible and delicious, but you're just choosing to throw that money away. So my introduction to food waste was purely fiscal, and I wanted to survive as a bootstrapped business. The same is true for you at home. If you're throwing cauliflower away, you might not notice because it's a handful of cauliflower leaves and it might only be worth a few cents. But if you multiply that by every head of cauliflower you ever buy in your life, and everyone that your neighbor does and your town does and your city and your state, and you see the scale that becomes, you start to get a sense of how it really adds up. And it's much more visible in a restaurant when you're buying maybe, $10,000 worth of food a month. You can see that the waste adds up to real dollars pretty quickly. So if you're at home and you're thinking it's just pennies here and there, try to get a sense of that scale, and that can really help in your motivation. Anyway, when I sold that company, I went and worked for a food tech company, and then I had some time and again scale, and I saw how much food they were wasting. But also right around that time, I started learning about the environmental impacts of food waste, and it wasn't just money, but it was the environment. And I thought that was a very interesting niche for me to be in, because I was already in food, and not only that, I was helping people eat at home, not in a restaurant. And one of the things I learned at that time, which is, what has become my focus for the last 5 years or so, is that more food is wasted in our own homes than at any other point in the food system by total of amount of food wasted. We hear a lot about food being wasted on farms, ugly produce that needs a new home, food rescue. So maybe from institutions or, tech company campuses where they can't eat all the food, and getting that rehomed to people who need a meal. We hear a lot about grocery stores that waste food, or expiration dates, or restaurants that waste food. All of those points are very, very important. And to really have a meaningful impact on food waste and climate change, we will certainly have to work in all those areas. But the biggest percent is food wasted at home. And a lot of, I think, investors are maybe wary of working in consumer food waste because you just make your measurement 1 cucumber at a time or 2 cauliflower leaves at a time. But again, it really does add up. So I, having worked in literally thousands of people's homes for many years, thought that I had a pretty good handle on why people were wasting food at home. I put out a survey and I interviewed over 1,000 families who said that they cared about climate change and they cared about wasting food. I've yet to meet anyone who has glee at throwing away food because it's fun for them. Nobody likes it. But what they said, and I bet if you're in this target market listening, you already know the answer. You care, but you're way too tired, you're way too busy, and you don't even know how to start. You don't even know where to begin to make those changes. So that's when I started Ends and Stems, which is recipes and meal planning to help people reduce their food waste. The idea was that as an expert chef who could write recipes, I would write my recipes a little bit different so that if you're going to use cauliflower, my recipes would specifically instruct you to save the leaves, cut up the core, and make that part of your cauliflower dish, where normally they just tell you to eat the florets. And then by pairing recipes together for the week, we could use half a bunch of herbs on Monday and the other half a bunch of herbs on Wednesday. And that's still available. You can still go to endsandstems.com and get those recipes or participate in those meal plans. Time goes by, and then more people I find are writing me to tell me that they like Ends and Stems, they like my recipes, but their kids aren't eating the food and they need to cancel their service, or they don't know what to do about getting their kids to eat. And then in my Facebook group, one of the questions for entry is, what is your biggest struggle in the kitchen? And honestly, I lost count. I have on my computer saved over 500 responses from people that say, basically some version of your kids aren't eating the dinner, your kids are too picky, you don't know how to deal with it, or the one that really makes me want to help the most, which is that parents will cook a meal, sit down for dinner, the kids complain, and then they feel pressure or not sure how to handle it, and they have to get up and go make something else, which I understand. I actually have a 4-year-old who's not a great eater, and you don't want to send your kid to bed hungry. You wonder if they're getting all the right nutrients. Are they growing? Why is this so stressful? Why can't you just eat? So I get it. And I started adding to my recipes photos and instructions on how to cook one meal so that as the grown-ups, you don't always have to eat kid food. I want you to eat well too. You deserve that just as much. But how can you cook that recipe and then make little changes along the way so that you ultimately have a kid-friendly plate, especially for your really choosy eaters, or maybe even just people with dietary restrictions. If you're cooking for, somebody who eats meat or demands meat, somebody who is a vegetarian, and somebody who's gluten or dairy-free, it can be really challenging to put all of those in one meal. And then it's super exhausting for the person who feels like they're the one responsible for cooking all the family foods. So I made those changes to the ends and stems recipes. And then more recently, I put together a digital course, which I sold in January. It was really, really fun. I'm about to put that back on the market again, and I look forward to a new group of students who want to join that. And that really is about all the things. And I think what my point of all this is, my very long-winded answer to the woman who said, "Who the heck are you and what do you do?" is that what I have learned as a chef who wants to help people reduce food waste is that we are all strapped. We're spread thin. There are too many things going on that even if we want to reduce food waste in our house, we come home and we do that after a long and exhausting day. That's like not the best time to be like, I know what I'm going to do. Climate action. We can't do it that way. We need to find ways to make mealtime, feeding, shopping, planning, dealing with expiration dates, putting our food away from the grocery store. All of those things need to be easier and less mentally draining. We need to get our kids set up on the path to successful eating so that we're confident that what we're serving them is both something that they will eat, something that will teach them to eventually try new foods when they're ready, but also something where we can say, this is what you're eating. We're not getting up to make another meal because I also don't have the time or the energy for that. And pulling all of those things together into one is a lot, but only after we reduce our stress around dinner and mealtime and planning and cooking and eating. My God, even listing it is exhausting, right? We need to pull that down and make it easier and less stressful. And then maybe we can start to factor in my ulterior motive, which is to get you to reduce your food waste in a way that's sort of effortless. I heard somebody say very early on in my journey in learning about food waste that we need effortless daily solutions. And I think that's really true because whether or not your kid is fed or going to wake up in the middle of the night is an immediate alarm. You have to solve that. You need to feed dinner to you, yourself, and your family every day. But worrying about what's going to happen in 3, 5, 10, 20 years in our food systems and the health of our planet is something that you just low-key worry about all the time, but you can also just keep pushing off and pushing off. So how can we kind of bring these things back? So I'd love to hear your thoughts always. I'm working on a bunch of solutions and trying to put out videos like this. I'd love for you to join my mailing list. I'm trying to put these things out in newsletter. I've been doing a lot on TikTok recently, and that's really fun. But also, since you're here now, in this video, I want to give you a couple ideas. So the 2 easiest things that you can do in your home for climate action around food right now, starting today, that don't take much time or cost any money. Number 1, try to eat less meat. You do not need to ever become a vegan or a vegetarian. That's never going to happen for the world. It's not really even advisable for the world. But if those of us who eat a lot of meat could eat, or really any amount of meat, could eat 10% less. So think about how much this is. Let's say you eat meat, and you can do the math. So this is your action. Do the math and figure out in a standard month how many meals have meat in them. So maybe you eat meat every lunch and every dinner. And I did the math out. I gotta cheat here. I did the math out for 60 days, right? So 60, or rather 60 meals. So 30 days, 2 meals a day, right? Lunch and dinner. That's 60 meals with meat. If you reduce that by 10%, that's only three, it's only 3 meals where you can just have a cheese pizza or a mushroom pizza instead of a pepperoni pizza. And that really counts. That's awesome. You can have grilled cheese for dinner. It doesn't need to be like, vegan hippy dippy bulgur bowl with nutritional yeast on top. You don't have to go like full further than you're comfortable with. But the reason for that is that meat is land intensive, water intensive, and emissions intensive. So again, you're never going to hear me, well, never say never, but at the moment, I'm not planning on ever telling you that you need to become a vegetarian, but reduce by 10%. The other thing that you can do is reduce your food waste. So this is what I talk about all the time. But the action I'm going to assign you today is to do a food waste audit. Even though the word audit is not fun, a food waste audit can be really fun. So there's a very scientific way to do it, and that's why I continue to call it a food waste audit, because that's what you'll see is out there in the scientific world. But we're going to do an at-home just for your family version, and I want you to make it fun. So basically what you'll do is pick a couple of days, 2 or 3 days, and then every time you go to throw something away, whether that's kitchen scraps from prepping your meal, whether that's leftovers, your kid's school lunchbox, their leftover breakfast, or whatever it is, get everybody on board. When you throw something away, snap a picture of what you're going to throw away on your phone before you do it. And then after those 2 or 3 days are done, get together with everybody you can interest in your family and look at these pictures and see if you can notice any trends or consistencies. Are you constantly throwing away grains? Did you make too much rice and too much pasta? Did you make too much leftover, too big of a portion, and then you didn't eat your leftovers? Are you constantly throwing away berries or lettuce or whatever it is? And then instead of just reducing my food waste, which is obtuse, it's hard, there's nowhere to grab onto that. Then you can look at it and say, wow, we are throwing away leftover coffee every morning, the too many grains, and fresh produce. And then you can find ways to buy less, don't buy that item, cook less. So kind of simple ways to get started and make little tiny baby changes. So you can consider it a win if you make a little tiny baby change. It does not have to be a big overhaul, just a little change. And the last thing I just want to, again, let you off the hook and inspire you with is the idea of individual behavior change versus systemic change. So individual behavior change is what each of us do as individuals. Systemic change is corporations and laws, government, and then industries like drilling or using natural gas or clear cutting, monocropping, what we're growing, the plastics industry, all these kinds of things. If you look up the people that are, focused on those systems and corporations, I will often see folks saying not to put pressure on individuals because we need the corporations to change. And I actually didn't pull the numbers and I forget what it is, but something like, I don't know, 80-90% of all the emissions are made by like a handful of companies and systems. That's true. So I'm not disputing that, but we need both types of change. As an individual, like sitting at home, I will wait forever. I mean, it's so frustrating to just wait for these big changes to happen. And there's nothing I can get up from my computer right now and go do that's going to change systems overnight. It's like, steering the ship, and it just takes a while to turn. But the individuals are little boats. So we can turn and zip through and we can make all these changes. And if we get together as larger and growing groups of people, our little changes actually really do add up over time, and they matter and they're important, and it feels good. It's really exciting. So on Instagram, another creator called Sustainable Minimalist had a great post this week about we need individual changes because our house is on fire. And if your house is on fire, you're not going to sit around, kick your feet up, and just wait for the fire truck. At minimum, you're going to get up and run out the door and try to, save a photo album and your pets on the way out. So we need to make those small changes while we also wait for the big changes. But where I want to let you off the hook is that as individuals, we're pressed and crammed and stressed on all sides. So don't let the corporations or the government gaslight you into thinking you're solely responsible, because then what I've seen is people who then make a mistake or they use a plastic straw or whatever it is, feel the weight or the pressure of not having done enough, and then you give up and you quit. So it's sort of both. Your actions matter. You should do them. You should grow and flex that muscle. And also not panic if you have an off day, because it's not all on you and you can't do this alone. So hopefully that makes sense. It's a both kind of thing, and you can almost use that to navigate, okay, I'm going to make these changes and take these actions when I can, but also Coca-Cola needs to stop selling their soda in bottles, and that would do amazing things for the plastics industry. So let me know if you have any questions, comments. If you're going to do the food waste audit, I'd love to hear about it. So send me a message anywhere. I read all my private messages because otherwise it's just me talking to my phone, and I'd rather hear from you personally. So do send me a message or leave a comment below, and I'll see you next week. I have at least 2 more videos I'm going to do in this sort of little series. See you then.